I haven't gone through FL Studio. We've gotten a good look at a lot of different things and gone through a lot of the basics and a little bit more than that too. We're now just going to add a few different things to that, a little bit of the additional helpers, the additional tools from here and there. And again, we're not going to get into a ton of detail, but some of these few things can just be a little bit helpful to make your workflow just a bit smoother. So some things here maybe I didn't mention and some things I will say again. Plus there's some things that I just won't be able to get to right now because there's a lot in FL Studio. But to start, remember again, the hint panel is a very useful tool, and anytime you're hovering over something or just want to get a good idea of any control effectively anywhere, just take a glance up there and it can help you out. Another really general thing, we know that we can right click to solo any kind of track or insert, or even if we go to the channel rack and add a few channels in here, whatever kind, we can solo those too, just clicking and soloing from the green dot or having multiple active. But a nice thing that we can do is lock these. So if we hold shift and click, you can see that a lock shows up, and anytime that I would solo or unsolo this, the locked channels or locked tracks on the playlist, wherever you may be doing this, it will just maintain their state. Same for mixer, you can do all that. Effects plugins, pretty much anywhere there's a green dot you can lock it, and that's pretty cool. Over in the browser, if we go ahead and find packs, there's plenty of loops that we can throw in here too. I didn't really mention loops at all, but if you click and drag onto the playlist, you can work with pre-made audio loops, and they'll automatically stretch with your tempo, or at least these stock ones will. If we go into the playlist and play, and so that's a quick way to pick from things. If you have loop packs, anything like that, a lot of the time those markers will be there, and if they aren't, there are ways to set them yourself, such as with SliceX, which is a plugin. Let's drag a loop onto the SliceX, and you'll see that we basically have this laid out in there, and instead of notes on here, we have those individual slices of that loop laid out, and you can set these, move them, and work with them on loops that are already set up, or you set up your own. So that's a cool plugin to have. Back in audio clips, if I double click here, there's a few different ways we could view those. If we want to right click, we could see it as a spectrum view over in the playlist, and that just shows a different view of the frequencies. Low ones are at the bottom and higher frequencies kind of fade off differently, as opposed to showing a waveform. You can also right click and show that as multi-channel if we turn off the spectrum, and then you have left and right channels instead of just the one waveform. So that's a nice option, and it does just apply to that singular channel of audio. So other ones can have different views however you want them lined up, and then you can group like tracks, and I'll hold shift and turn off that lock. And a nice thing that we can do is if we hold alt, we can mute or solo just a group. So holding alt, you basically just make it so that you are dealing with that whole group of channels instead of just one. So that is good. Another one in the playlist, we have time markers, and that's nice. If we add one, we'll just say start, and then you have a time marker that you can shift around. You can place it wherever you might want it. You can add other ones, just right clicking up here now. Middle, you can place that in a spot, and then if you double click, you would select just that section. You could actually do a number of different looping possibilities with that, or you can move everything for that content left, and then it will slice and swap those different sections. So that is a cool option. There's a bunch of different ways to edit audio. One way is to do so just in the playlist, and we kind of saw this. We can slice, right shift to do that. If you want to stretch something out, you can click stretch up here, and then that sample will stretch. And right now, anything on that channel, anything associated with this, which we can see by clicking up in the corner of that clip and then saying select similar clips, you'll see all the ones that are highlighted of that channel, as seen in the channel rack. But there's a lot of options to change audio just in the channel settings alone, normalizing, reversing, fading in, or fading out. And since this loop is stretched out and kind of long, some of these things are a little bit laggy, but if we get a shorter sample, let's just go into legacy and we'll pick a instrument sound. This choir works, and if we open that channel, there are the same settings, but you can see how they're kind of working. You can do things in the additional pre-computed effects, pogo, creates a falling pitch effect of the sample, and there's a lot of other little things like that you can tweak around and see what they do. But editing audio further, we could go into the mixer, and we saw the Edison. Obviously, that's a good way to edit audio. Pull it into Edison, and you can select different parts, make loop regions. And that's how you saw with this sample that this sound actually looped when I played it, because it has a loop region. And we can see some of these instruments do have looped regions, and these are just running as samplers. So they're not actually synthesizing anything. They're literally just a single sample that we're playing across the keyboard. And they have a loop region so that when you play a note, it keeps playing and looping, which is set by doing that sort of thing in an Edison editor and giving that data so that it can loop the sample. A few other audio editing plugins. We have New Time and New Tone. Both of those have kind of similar functions, but they are different and unique. New Time is meant to basically be something we can edit transients, drum loops, anything like that, and you'll see kind of how that works. It picks your transients out, and then you can shift them around and stretch basically a loop or a sample to change how it's played. And that can be a drum loop, or that can be any sort of thing to just adjust where things happen, like words. You could stretch where certain words come in or certain pauses, things like that, time-based sort of things. And New Tone is similar to Melodyne, if you've heard of that. And we'll just drop a vocal sample in here so that we can see a little bit of what that's doing. It's basically just finding the pitch of whatever notes are sung, and you can edit how those are going and change the actual pitch of how it's working. So kind of like, if you think of auto-tuning, this is like manual tuning, which can obviously be a little bit more deliberate. Another thing I want to mention again quickly, we can search a folder for presets by hitting Shift F, and that will search just within a folder. Say you want to find a fat something. There might not be anything that does that, but if we search for Shift F again and say kick, it'll pull that up. We can hit F2 and F3 to go backwards and forwards, searching through that. So once you have a bunch of sample packs, it might be good to be able to do that. You could search within them to find certain sorts of kits, anything like that. So knowing how to search in the browser can really narrow the time that you might be taking looking through it. A couple other little things. When you turn a knob, you can go to Tools, Last Tweaked, and then if you forgot what knob it was, it'll both say what it is, and it'll also give you the same options you would get if you were right-clicking on it. So that's nice. You can make an automation clip of whatever you last turned. And this especially comes in handy in some plugins, especially third-party plugins, when it doesn't let you right-click because of the interface of the plugin. But you can just turn it most of the time and still be able to go into Last Tweaked and automate it or anything like that if that's what you want to do. Similar idea, that button I added in the toolbar here, you can also edit the Last Tweaked knob. A few more little things here. We can sort in the picker panel by name, color, or mixer track number, just right-clicking up here. And that goes for patterns or audio, any sort of clip you want to organize and sort. So when you have a bunch of patterns laid out here, that can come in some handy. Just keeping all those in check and knowing what clips you've used or unused and clear those if you don't need them. In a similar vein, you can sort channels in the channel rack by a number of things, by color, by name, or even by mixer track number. All good ways to organize. And if we make a pattern again to do some automation, I'll just edit events on this one. We can do a few tools on here, like making an LFO. And this tool is pretty good. We can adjust what it is, size and speed, everything of the LFO. Say accept. And now we have that pattern as an LFO. We can draw a bunch in and have that event editor apply however long we want it to. So pretty similar to making a automation clip and setting that automation clip to an LFO and adjusting things here. Another quick thing, if we want to use FL Studio as a plugin inside of another DAW, that is possible by rewiring. That'll vary on how you're using it and what DAW, but it's not too difficult to practice to get that going. Just something to have in the back of your mind if you want to do that. Again, personally, I do most of my work just in FL Studio itself and don't move over into other DAWs, but it is possible if that's what you want to do. And finally, a helpful thing to know is that by clicking F1, you will pull up the online manual, and that will apply to whatever it is you currently have open. So mixer or playlist, if I hit F1, I'll get the manual page for the playlist, or I could search through it, find it for individual plugins, samplers, and be able to look through to get a little bit more detail than even just the hint panel will give me. which is definitely a helpful tool to have on hand. But with that, that's a good bit of just additional information, some tools and helpers that can just kind of augment your workflow to be a little bit smoother. And with that, we'll call this good and actually go over to the export options in the next video, so I will see you then.